this session with Michelle Polchow, University of California, Davis. I'm going to talk about a new service that the ISSN International Center has implemented. And actually, Michelle volunteered to test the service for us. So she will explain what she did with the service and how submit, retrieve, reuse helped her checking the preservation status of her collection. I would like, first of all, and really briefly, talk about the ISSN International Center because some of you may not be familiar with it. So the ISSN International Center is based in Paris. It's an intergovernmental organization created in 1975 under the auspices of the French government and UNESCO. And we have now 93 member states that actually all have created a national center, whether hosting by the National Library or a research department. And we have several services, including the ISSN portal. I won't go into details. If you have a look at the portal, you'll find more information. So I'm here to talk about this service, submit, retrieve, reuse. And I would like, first of all, to explain what archival status information is on the ISSN portal and where you can find it. How a library can retrieve information about the quality of the ISSN they use in their catalogs to identify their journals, and also how this library can retrieve information about archival status. And I will go through the process of using the service and tell you how you can actually register or subscribe to this service. So you may be familiar with the Keepers Registry. This service was created by EDINA at the University of Edinburgh. And in 2019, the ISSN International Center took over the service when funding in the UK was stopped. And we have now 14 archiving agencies participating in the service, meaning they share data with us on the journals they actually archive. You can also find on the portal a link to Keepers Registry some statistics on how many journals are currently preserved through this project, and how many journals, for example, are preserved by 3 or more archiving agencies, of course, participating in Keepers Registry. So what you have here is a screenshot of the information you can find on the portal. And as you can see, this title, which is Environmental Economics, is actually indexed in Keepers Registry. And if you go to the tab named Archival Status, you will find here information on the archiving agency, which is actually responsible for long-term preservation of this title. In certain cases, for example, for this title, Cultural Anthropology Online, you see that there are several agencies actually preserving this title. So why should a library retrieve information about the quality of their ISSN and the archival status of their journal titles? Well, actually, the first objective is to check the validity of the ISSN in the catalog or in the database. Also to update the ISSN when needed. And of course, retrieve the key metadata related to this ISSN. That could be also of help if you want to make room in the 3D or the digital storage facilities. It would certainly help to know where these titles are archived. And another objective is for your patrons, for your users, provide information about the long-term access to these journals, and especially when, for example, a title ceases, it's important to know where it is held and where you can get access to it. So this service is called Submit, Retrieve, Reuse, and I will show you how you can use it. That's fairly simple, I would say. As you can see, here I've prepared an Excel list of titles with their ISSN, and I've put all ISSN in one column in a CSV format, and you can, with your credentials that you can get from our sales department, you can enter your credentials in the system and submit, as you can see here on the screen, your list of ISSN. When you do that, you also tick what information you want to retrieve from the system. So here, I ticked every box, retrieve ISSNL information, include keepers data, because we're talking about that. We want information on the long-term preservation of these titles. Include indexed by data, which is information on where these titles are also indexed, for example, in the DOAJ or in other databases. And in this case, I've also ticked the box to include ROAD data, and ROAD is the directory of scholarly open access resources. So this is also of interest, but Michelle will come to that, so I won't go into details. So when you do that, once that is done, you can submit the list. You go to another, in the menu, you choose user background task, and as you can see underneath, you get information on how, which files are being prepared or processed by the system. You get an Excel file as an outcome, including a report on the ISSN found in the list, and also a report including valid and invalid ISSN. And as you can see on the screen, there is also a counter. So when you subscribe to this service, and the cost is 0.15 euro per ISSN submitted, you pay for a certain number of ISSN you want to submit to the service. And when you do that, you can do that in several times. And what we decided also is when you submit an ISSN, if you're resubmitted at another moment to check whether the corrections you've made have been taken into account and or now the ISSN is valid, you're not charged again. The charge of 0.15 euro is only per ISSN submitted, but you can submit the same ISSN as many times as you want. And then you get detailed metadata with the key title, the ISSN, keepers registry information, the indexing services. As you can see here, there are some examples like Medline, PubMed, Scopus, etc. And you get also detailed metadata for the print and for the online version of the title, with also information, of course, on the country, etc., etc. So that's the service in a nutshell. And if you are interested in getting more information or subscribing to this service, you can contact here our sales department. You have the address on the screen, and you can get credentials after signing the user license to proceed with your submission. I've mentioned the fact that sometimes when you submit a list of ISSN, you can have invalid ISSN that may come from errors that have been replicated in the system. And so we did, well, Michelle will explain that we had this case with the ISSN UC Davis submitted. So we created another service that we provide. When you have invalid ISSN, you can send us the titles, and we retrieve the ISSN for these titles. So that's, let's say, a complementary service to the first service, which is ISSN list submission. This one is title list submission. So I've done the same with a few titles here. And so the process is a bit more complicated because, as you can see there on the list, there are some titles which are in red color, meaning the system could not locate this title in the system. So you have to relaunch a search in the system to be able to find it. So, and you can select during the process the ISSN that seems to be the most similar to the one you're looking for. So you have to go through all the list of titles, and the ones in red color have to be searched manually in a way, or selecting options that the system provides. Same thing, you go to the user background task, you get a file as a result, and as you can see here, same thing. There were, the system was able to process some ISSN, but there were 4 ISSN that were not found in the database. That means that actually, as you can see here on the third row, that this title has not been identified. You were not able to find an ISSN, and submitting the title, the system was not able to find any ISSN. So meaning this title has not been identified by the ISSN network. So this is, in a nutshell, the 2 services that we've implemented, and I'll be happy to answer questions after Michelle's presentation.
All right, I just came from Metadata the musical, so I feel like I'm probably going to put you to sleep at this point. That nice warm afternoon. But first of all, I want to thank Gaelle and the ISSN Center for about the last 18 months that we've worked together. And boy, I have a whole new immense appreciation for anyone who works with serials bibliographic materials. So I think I will go through how I came about doing a long-term preservation project, and how I arrived at doing the overlap with the Keepers Registry, and some of the results from the text and data mining of the data that we received back, and then some information about collection risk and impact to the ISSN analysis, how you can actually apply this when you get back to your library. So I'm going to start off with a quote that actually is from a colleague that I worked with that did physical preservation, but I think her quote, let's see, where's my forward? No? There we go, thank you. So she said, every institution preserves its most valuable collections. The library's collections of over 1 million volumes are probably one of the university's most valuable holdings with a worth of over $1 million, and that was quite a few years ago. So we know that digital content is exponentially more expensive, but it's really difficult to preserve. Whose responsibility is it? And I think that ambiguity really just clouds that digital aspect. So I think as I approached this project, the overlap analysis came about from several things. That as an electronic resources librarian, I do a lot of troubleshooting. And often it's working with patterns where you see one problem, it most likely may affect several items. And I think in looking for those patterns for broken links, we also, the University of California, Davis has made it a high priority to do transformative open access agreements. So those are two combination of things, open access and electronic, that can get you into a lot of trouble with broken links. So when I think it really hit home for me once. I had a faculty member call and said, can you just verify for me? It doesn't look like I can find a journal. And so I looked all the ways I knew to look and finally had to say to him, I think it's gone. And I truly, as a librarian, ethically, I just couldn't even bear to ask, like, was your article in there? Is this something you've been using for a class every semester and now it just disappeared? Were you in the middle of a research project and you were building upon this article that had gone before you? And I think it really felt that it hit the heart of the library's mission, that we're to be trustworthy in safekeeping the record of knowledge. And here we had provided something in our catalog that we just ended up deleting. And I think that whole process of deleting something felt like you're deleting a citation trail that just eventually is eroding away if we're not really able to preserve that content. So I think that simultaneously, Michael Lasko did research showing that between 2000 and 2019, 174 open access journals had disappeared. And so I think this really merged into a concern about the degree of risk that UC Davis's journal content might be subject to. I was also co-chair of NASIG's Digital Preservation Committee at the time, and we just released the NASIG Model Digital Preservation Policy. So again, all of those things converged, and I wanted to do an overlap analysis to find out if UC Davis's journals had keepers. So I went to the ISSN portal because I had learned about this in the Digital Preservation Committee. I knew that you could look up the titles, identify what content is archived, or if it was not and it's at risk of loss, that there were no keepers. You could determine the actual coverage of the content down to the issue, volume, date ranges, and then on what terms can the content be accessed. So that took a little bit more learning about the different types of archiving agencies and their purposes and business models. So in 2018, NASIG did a survey that said 75% of our respondents were unfamiliar with the Keepers Registry. So I did feel that I was headed in the right direction with my my research project. So it is a free-based service to use the archival status and electronic archive coverage dates. And when you look it up, I think Gaelle kind of showed how you're able to get quite a bit of information on a specific title. So when I took a look at how I could come up with a list of our collection, and I searched around the ISSN Center's website, and I didn't really see how I was going to upload my 208,862 titles. And I wanted to upload that many because although some of the titles overlapped, coverage didn't always overlap. So I wanted to get that full overlap of every date. So I got an email from Gaelle, and she said, we're very interested in, or we're in the midst of developing this tool, and could we use UC Davis's data for beta testing? So I think that led to the subscription service that could accommodate an upload at this volume. So I also, behind the scenes, I was preparing for Charleston last year, and I did this in the summer, and I just kept thinking, I can't look up 208,000 by November and report on this in our presentation. So, so we did the bulk upload, and I think being able to retrieve that data, just even having it in a tabular form, as you all know, Excel spreadsheets are much more easy to manipulate data, and oftentimes what you come away with isn't the results you're expecting when you're working with a data set that big. So so you can easily check to see if there are no preservers. You can see who and how many are on. So in this case, the British Library, Scholars Portal, which is out of Canada, Clocks, Polchow, that all of those have a different business model for their preservation. And when we allowed the upload in bulk, I think that I was surprised by how much I learned about ISSN numbers in general. So I think the application of the assessment to identify the level of safeguard for like 3 keepers rule, which I'll go into more, and also the relationship with archiving agents. Sometimes we reference post-cancellation access or perpetual access, and then there's the long-term safeguarding. So I think it's really important to understand the difference that you may cancel something, but you may not be able to have access to it until a publisher ceases existence. And so those two things might not be overlapping in the time period that you need to gain access to something. I think fulfilling the e-resource license terms is another way to check and see if your publishers are actually making a deposit. So if your Springer license says, yes, we'll deposit our content with a third party, you can look up your Springer journals and you can see, maybe they've made, I don't want to pick on Springer, but maybe they haven't made a deposit in a year. So that's something you can bring up during your negotiation. And just ensure that you're still interested and are wanting that to be continued to be up to date. And then you can also see gaps and inactivity in the deposits. So, so here we'll look at UC Davis's results as it went through the new service. And I'm a very visual person, so a bar chart's always helpful. The first column is all the serial records I submitted. The next line, which goes down a little bit further, are the valid ISSN numbers that were found in the data. And then a smaller chunk are linked to ISSN numbers. So I learned that the system could track an ISS number that ceased and merged into another journal. The journal may have split the other direction, and 2 journals, or 1 journal became 2 journals. So all of that data is within the ISSN portal and could be output for me to have a better understanding of all of the data points that are involved in serials. And then my little bar down there is how many titles overlapped with the keeper's registry at 1 keeper or more. So digging into the numbers, I submitted 208,862 lines of data that I exported out of ALMA. And we, University of California, Davis is part of the University of California, California Digital Library. So we receive about 80% of our e-resources from our consortia. The next number, 192,294, were all of the valid ISSN numbers. And I thought we did pretty well. I think I measured that we were like at 0.007 as our accuracy for how many records we had right. So I looked at it as in a positive. And then distinct ISSN numbers, and then the invalid was 1,174. The roads, open access, I had 27,292 titles. And then my number that I originally thought would just be really quick to get was my 58,933. So the metadata experience, to have the invalid ISSNs, Gaelle and I felt like it would be good to correct those. And I realized like having invalid ISSN numbers affects our users greatly, because if you select something out of an abstract and index database, and then it comes back into our Alma Primo system to search for it, we have an invalid number, and the valid number is being requested, so the user is going to get the answer. We don't have it. So I, not being a CAD logger, I asked our metadata unit if he'd take a look at fixing this. And I think, again, this is a slide that just demos that evolution of the whole ecosystem where that ISSN number is going through. So he discovered that the numbers were in what Alma calls a community zone. So a shared data bank of knowledge base. And if we changed our invalid numbers, the community zone was just going to come back and refresh those numbers. So it was not going to work very well. So, so again, I'm trying to stick with my keeper's registry, and I kind of get sidetracked in this data cleaning. So we decided, Gaelle and I contacted Ex Libris and asked them if they could take a look at these 1,000 plus invalid numbers, and they are working on this. And I show this slide that in your home institutions you may have a different electronic resource management system, but I think it's pretty impactful to think that if we can correct these invalid ISSNs, it's going to affect about 1,417 Alma institutions. So, so there really is a big ecosystem out there that you end up, you know, popping that can of worms that comes springing out at you after you look at this data. And I think this was pretty interesting. Ex Libris actually had a content session, and I liked this graphic that I felt really explained where I was in this process. And two publishers said the manuscript submission process often starts, and they have a project in mind, and it's gaining steam for who's going to be creating the content. And they said often all of the metadata collection can come at the very, very end. So you may have journals being created that were not assigned an ISSN number. And so then by doing that at the end, there's a lot of room for mistakes. You might start using the print ISSN, and this is the launch of the new digital version. And so those numbers can easily get lost. And I think this chart is really good to show you how complex that whole ecosystem is as well. So when I looked at our specific numbers back to the Keepers Registry, only 40% of our journal titles have at least one keeper. I'm not sure I'm surprised. I'm definitely dismayed that it's this low. And I think about University of California, Davis has so many substantial programs in agriculture, veterinarian science, marine science for California, our California forestry, which, you've probably heard about that in the news. So all of that research could really be at risk. And I think that was very concerning. And I think each of your own campuses have unique areas that you have faculty working extensively in. And could that be like the man who called me one day and said, "Can you find this journal? I don't know what happened to it." So I'm going to get back to the Keeper's Rule of 3. And this I cite in my references, but Gaelle had suggested including this, that it's the economics of digital preservation. And with a finite budget, we know that some stuff is going to get lost, but each additional copy improves the safekeeping. And that cost effectiveness in replication can be pretty minimal. So, and they do caution it's an indicator of safekeeping, not an assurance against loss. So, you know, with our climate change or things like that, I think one copy is not sufficient, and that's future research I can do with this data set that I've not had a chance to do, but I do not know how many keepers of my 40% have 3 keepers. And again, that's title level, so it's not content level. So one title may only have 5 issues, and there were 95 issues. So, so there's definitely that 40% number has a great possibility to decline. And I just added the archiving agencies that are within the keepers, and you can find that information on the website. But you would want 3 of those, and again, if you look, like if it was the British Library and Clocks releases that information once the business is no longer sustained, so you would not be able to get post-cancellation out of either the British Library or Clocks.
Swiss National Library.
Oh, I'm sorry, the Swiss National Library. Yeah. So I think, well, in any of the national libraries are not going to give you direct access to the digital copy.
They don't update their data anymore. They are.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, so when we have updated information,
For all the other
Okay,
agencies,
okay.
but the British Library and the Swiss National Library actually withdrew from the
to make
service.
deposits. Okay, okay. I don't know if you heard that, but I think the Swiss and British Library are no longer making deposits through the Keepers Registry to let them know what's being saved. They may be saving it, but they're not registering it. So how does this work in a library to have this information? I think you can find guidance on selecting archiving agencies to subscribe to and support. Consider how many titles that overlap with your collection that you want to maintain access, and match the titles with the agencies. The service can be important when there's no provision for post-cancellation access, and a publisher doesn't offer that as a negotiation feature. It can also help inform weeding projects for print materials, and then just increase the stability for hybrid open access and fully open access journals. And I know a conference at this point that you've been inundated with so much information, and I think some takeaways for today that if you're not sure where this fits in to your home, daily work routine, that you know, vanishing scholarship can only be measured after it's gone. So I think being able to really bring this to the attention of campus administrators is really challenging. But within the licensing process, librarians can use a new tool that has recently been updated on LibLicense, and there's refreshed digital preservation language that makes the negotiation much more specific and accountable to really reiterate the importance of this. I think past language had said that the publisher could give you any format, so you might be handed a flash drive, and libraries can't host flash drives very easily. So again, having a sustained digital long-term preservation agency handling this work is the preferred language to adopt. NASIG Guide also has talking points and questions that you can ask publishers about digital preservation if you don't see any of their journals in the registry. And I think that helps introduce a conversation, which is definitely a starting point for any publisher that, that has not had this brought to their attention. And then I even think the data integrity, working in technical services, having limited budgets, I think it's pretty hard to argue against finding out that if you haven't had your ISSN numbers validated, that in itself is an exercise, and you get this magical information about the keeper's registry that comes with that. So I think that then offers the opportunity that now you have this data, and it can start a discussion within your library about whatever your number ends up being. And I think the other thing that about invalid ISSNs, and again, I don't want to generalize that everybody is in a primo alma environment, but Ex Libris has started an index of added content. And in dropping that content into the ecosystem, we discovered the other day all these citations had flowed out of an online encyclopedia, and each encyclopedia entry was basically a paper with the citations at the end of it. Because it was a music encyclopedia, the authors hadn't even spelled out the acronym and just used JAMS. So our system saw that as the Journal of Agriculture and Marine Science. And so someone submitted a ticket and said, this is the Journal of American Musicology. And the same thing with VMW. It sent him to a medical journal. And so by having 3 different types of data in our systems, that we have MARC records, we have KBART files, and now we have these indexing files that they're just dumping thousands, billions, I think is actually what they advertise, of all these levels of information. I think having your ISSN data as accurate as possible is really going to help your user at the end of the day. So I have several references here at the end, and hopefully we have time for questions. I didn't go too long.